Alright, so today we're talking about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. The first question I would have is, what's in education records? Well, usually you can find directory information. Directory information includes the name, address, telephone number, date and place of birth, participation in extracurricular activities, the weight or the height of a student, the membership on athletic teams, dates of attendance, a diploma, and any awards received. You can also find educational record information in student records. This might include any school documents, grades, test scores, maybe some special ed information, disciplinary information, etc. And third, you can find strictly confidential information. This strictly confidential information might include a diagnosed learning disability, a diagnosed physical or mental disability, a medical condition, the use of prescription drugs, the history of drug or alcohol abuse and or treatment, HIV/AIDS, official transcripts, etc. Things that you will not find or should not find in education records are personal notes that have been written by school personnel and law enforcement records. So, what are the student and parent rights under FERPA anyway? Well, first, students and parents have the right to access an educational record that's been maintained by the school. Parents have to be notified of this right and given the information on the policies and procedures that are to be followed to view the educational records. The second right of students and parents is that parents can ask the school to change any information that's in the record if they think it's incorrect or misleading. And the general procedure for this is that school officials or someone in the school needs to meet with the parent or student within about 10 days or less to discuss the information that's believed to be incorrect. If an agreement is reached, then appropriate changes are made to the record and the changes are communicated to parents in a written form. But if the agreement is not reached by parents and the school, the parents can then request a formal hearing. And the formal hearing needs to take place in about 10 days or less, and a parent can bring legal representation if he or she wishes, and a decision in the formal hearing should be made within 10 days of the hearing. And parents must be informed of the decision, especially if the school doesn't change the information, because then a parent has the option to place a statement of disagreement in the file. Alright, so the third right for students and parents under FERPA is that consent must be provided to disclose personally identifiable information, and the consent needs to be provided by parents or students in written form, which means that it's signed and dated by the parent. And the consent form should include the records that are to be released, the reason for them to be released, and the names of the individuals to whom the records will be released to. Finally, the fourth right of students and parents under FERPA is that parents or students need to be informed of the disclosure of records to another school district in which the student plans to enroll, for example, or the disclosure of records in compliance with a judicial order, or maybe the release of directory information, which doesn't require consent, or perhaps the inspection by federal or state officials. So essentially, even if there's information that doesn't need consent for disclosure, like directory information, the school still needs to give advance warning to the parents or the students, especially with directory information, because parents or students do have the right to request that directory information isn't released or disclosed. And it's advisable that schools try to comply with the requests of parents. Alright, well, now we're looking at what schools have to do to comply with FERPA. First, schools need to notify parents and students of their FERPA rights and the policies and procedures for complying with FERPA, and this notification needs to happen every year. The notification must include the right to view the educational records, the right to seek amendment of records, the right to permit or deny consent or disclosure of personally identifiable information except where the Act authorizes disclosure without consent, and the right to file a complaint. Secondly, the school needs to notify parents and students who are disabled of their FERPA rights. Third, the school needs to give parents information for how to look at the records, request a change to a record, or file a complaint. So essentially, the school needs to outline the policies and procedures for the parents or students. Fourth, the school needs to keep student records under lock and key. Fifth, the school needs to keep a form in each student record or file that's to be signed and dated by anybody who accesses the file. And lastly, the school needs to notify parents of disclosure in advance for directory information, the transfer of records, etc. Alright, so the most important topic of the day. What are the rights and responsibilities of teachers, of you guys, under FERPA? First of all, teachers can look at student records if your intention is to better the educational process, so you are protected under FERPA as long as you have good intentions. Secondly, you are protected under FERPA when you're sharing student information as long as you're acting in good faith. And in good faith is essentially when everybody, all parties, have an educational interest for sharing the information. And so this is called qualified privilege, and you are protected as long as you are in good faith when you're sharing information about students. On the other side of things, you definitely need to avoid defamation. This includes slander and libel. So sharing of student information, either verbally or written, that doesn't enhance the educational process. And finally, please, above everything else, let's avoid malice. Remember that malice is the intent to harm or injure a student. So essentially using student information to attack a student or his or her family. One other important thing to remember is that you should really try not to share your opinions about students. I know that we have difficult days as teachers. Sometimes we have a hard time with students. And the first reaction that we have at the end of the day is to go next door to our neighbor teacher and just let it all out, just vent. But when you're venting, please keep your opinions about students to yourselves. Alright, so what consequences do we face if we don't comply with FERPA? Well, essentially, we need to remember that FERPA is a federal law, so it applies to any school that receives federal funds. So, the consequence is, if we don't comply with FERPA, dear old Uncle Sam is going to take that money and put it right back into his pocket. So essentially, our federal funding is going to be revoked. On a more personal level, for you guys, for you teachers, if you have problems with defamation, so talking about slander, libel, or malice, you could face liability or defamation charges. So please, let me say it one more time, keep your opinions about students to yourselves, and also try to avoid sharing information or putting information in student records that's not specific, it's not defensible, and it's out of the FERPA guidelines. Alright, well, if you would like to have more information, and I don't have the answers for you, you can always call this great hotline, 1-800-USA-LEARN, and talk to the government agency about FERPA and its guidelines. Or, if you like the old pen and paper routine, you can write a letter to the Family Policy Compliance Office at the U.S. Department of Education. Or, if you're more of a modern technology person, you can go online at www.ed.gov and go under the tabs Policy, General Legislation, and finally FERPA, and you'll find some information and other ways to contact the U.S. Department of Education with your questions about FERPA. So I hope we're all clear about what our responsibilities are to keep student information private and to keep everybody in our school community happy. Well, have a great day.